Hello, everybody. I am Lio Convoy. Thank you for joining us. Sorry for the delay. We were working out some technical issues and just giving the rundown of what's going on here. I am joined by Pete Sinclair. Pete, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you do before we get into the rundown here?
Oh, well, currently, right, I am part of Night Shining. We are a new company, I guess new in the grand scheme of things. Been around for about 2 3 years now. Kind of building what we're doing. We have I guess everybody's probably aware of what I used to do with Fun Publication as far as working with marketing and product development. A lot of the stuff that I used to do with Fun Publications, we've kind of brought that model. I would like to think the best parts of that model over to this company as far as working with and so we are a licensee of about 3 brands right now, smaller brands that we're trying to help make bigger brands, and we are looking at some of our own IPs that we're working on, and we run the show RoboCon,
Mm-hmm.
and we also now currently are producing product for the BotCon brand, which was acquired by BC Productions.
Oh,
Before that, long before 2005, I was when Fun Pub got the license, I was a fan, collector, dealer at many BotCons, been to every BotCon, worked with John and Carl, who founded BotCon at various times during BotCon, helped them run the unofficial show in 2004. So, I go back to the pre-internet days. So I guess I'm old in that regard.
all right. Now, just to give everybody a rundown here, I want to be very clear about a couple things here in chat. Uh, this isn't the type of stream where I'm gonna answer really goofy questions, or we're not gonna talk about Thundercats. I know it's the main focus of this channel, but we're gonna be talking specifically about BotCon. We're gonna be talking about people have had issues with Pete, and we're gonna bring that up because I think that's fair to do so. And this is going to be not a aggressive stream towards him. I want it to be an accurate stream towards him, and that's my intention here. I want to give a shout out to Greg, aka Calidor, who set this all up. He reached out to me back in February, saying that Pete was interested in coming on the show and telling what he has to say about all this. And it took some mulling over, and of course life got busy, coronavirus hit, and all that. And I went ahead and tagged Pete later or earlier this week, and we were able to agree to sit down and discuss all this. Before we get into the harder aspects, I want to go ahead and ask some basic questions about the new BotCon, if that's all right.
Sure, sure.
All right. Firstly, I want to know what is the extent of your involvement in here. Do you just own the license outright, or is it a group of you and other people? How does that work?
So, the license is owned by, so Night Shining is an LLC. That's a company that I work with Jesse Wittenrich, who
Mm-hmm.
used to do tons of work for us as a contractor back in the day. Everybody knows Jesse, Night Viper. He handles a lot of our social media accounts for RoboCon. So we had that, and then the opportunity came. BotCon was available. There was a group that got together that was interested in purchasing it. Um, I was happy to come on board to be a part of all that. And that kind of was when that whole thing was forming. Right now, we're not exactly sure how each role is going to play out. Right now, BotCon is owned by BC Productions, but it is just a brand owned by that entity.
Okay.
So there is, so much as Hasbro owns Transformers, BC Productions owns BotCon.
Mm-hmm.
They won't necessarily be producing anything specific. There are plans for a show. We're still working all that out with how that team's going to be. Like I said, there are. Make sure I don't want to forget anybody. There are 8 individuals involved with BC Productions, but it's not everybody is not necessarily in there as a. Again, it's more like an investing group.
Yeah.
I want to say it like that. So it's not like there's 8 officers and everybody's all working. Some people were there just to be happy because I mean, we'll be honest, BotCon was not cheap,
No.
so it required some investors, some funding to secure that. Everybody's very excited about it. We see BotCon as not just a convention name; we see it as a brand. That was something that I feel like I brought to the conversation, was that, this is more than just a yearly show. It's a part of pop culture. It's definitely rooted in It's kind of funny. It's only 10 years younger than Transformers. I mean, Transformers hit in '84 and BotCon hit in '94. So it's gonna be celebrating its 30th anniversary here in just a couple years, which is ridiculous. So we kind of looked at what we could do through Night Shining to help produce product for that. That's why we're doing the book. We're doing the BotCon. We're hosting the BotCon pre-party. There'll be some exclusive items available in conjunction with that. So I mean, it's this is the beginning, right? This is the very early, phase of all this. So we're looking for some other potential licensees, and I think this, there's an opportunity to really make this into something big, more than just the yearly show. Because again, BotCon in a lot of ways is there year round, so we want to make it a year round brand.
Now, what is your specific involvement with BC Productions?
Right now, I am not. I am just a investor in.
I see.
In Night Shining has a license to produce certain things BotCon related.
Okay. So kind of like how Super 7 has had the license to He-Man, is what you're kind of.
There's crossover because I'm involved in both, but that's all. But that's everyone was aware of that from the beginning. I mean, like I said, we're if anything, Robocon and BotCon are like cousins. I want to say they're sisters, maybe, but they're like kind of like distant cousins in a way. So like, if for whatever reason, things ever kind of changed in any involvements, I would still probably be involved with BC Productions, but Robocon and Night Shining would still be doing its own thing over here. So, like I said, they're not tied together in any type of official capacity other than the one being licensed by the other. If someone else can come along and, do books or do shirts better than we can do them, then my gosh, is willing to say, hey, we can sell 50,000 books. As someone who's invested in BC Productions, I'm like, well, heck, that's a lot more than I can sell through Night Shining. So absolutely. So,
Okay.
Right. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So big elephant in the room that I got to ask: does Hasbro have any involvement with BotCon as an official convention at this point?
No, they do not. That is not a anything that is moment.
I see.
But the future is always open.
Well, so. I have to ask, and this is back to the old BotCon. I always got mixed messages, and since you're one of the men in charge, if you can give me this answer, I'd appreciate it. What in the world was Hasbro thinking? Why did they drop BotCon in general back in 2016?
I think it was a variety of things. I mean, if you want to be honest, the missteps that the missteps that happened with Fun Pub through the years. I don't think they're missteps that necessarily are foreign to any company. I mean, my God, in this day of social media, we see missteps almost like on a daily basis with companies. We had ours. Transformers was changing at the time in their mind. Added to the fact that the entire brand team and PR team, everything had completely changed in the matter of a couple of years. All of a sudden, a story I always tell is, not always, but the story I have told a few times was we actually didn't make a trip up to Hasbro for meetings. We skipped a year, and I don't remember why. But I remember the difference between the 1 year we were up there. I think it was January of 2013, January of 2015. I just remember being up there and how different it looked from a people standpoint. Like basically, it was much younger. And as someone who was only 40, say that, it's even kind of scary to me. And I'm sitting there looking around. I just saw a lot of young faces. It felt like a much younger company. And then the marketing team changed, the brand team changed, the designers changed. And then I think there was, again, the way Hasbro was changing. I know there was talk of them pulling out of San Diego, of doing their own thing. So I think it just was companies change. I mean, Hasbro had the same PR company for 10 years, and then all of a sudden they didn't, and then went with someone new. So it's sometimes you just want to put on a new pair of pants, I guess. Was it the right decision? Well, that can be debated by everybody. I mean, I have my personal feelings on it, but
I think the fact that HasCon doesn't really go on anymore is kind of, regardless of personal feelings, I think that's a pretty good measurement at how well they succeeded in their endeavors. Unfortunately,
no.
when it comes to this new BotCon, is it going to be something Transformer centric to where that's the main focus, or are there other licenses or other properties you guys are going to focus on that you're going to roll into BotCon?
So the show I do, RoboCon, right now was billed as a robot convention to focus on all the great robot properties. BotCon, again, it will be rooted in Transformers, absolutely. It'll be rooted in that 80s nostalgia, 80s, 90s, 2000s nostalgia, this Beast Wars, G1, RID, all that stuff. As far as will it be the only thing, I don't think it can survive without having a license, right? So I can't really get into some of that stuff. So again,
Okay.
as Night Shining is working on some new IPs, early stages in the pipeline for a while. There's interest from other parties involved with BC Productions for some IP. When I say IP, I mean original IP.
Okay.
Just to be clear, it would be original. Yes. Okay. BotCon will have product associated with it. People are wondering, will there be BotCon exclusives? Yes, there will. It may take more of a San Diego format, you may see, again, BotCon we see now as a brand, not as just a something to slap on Transformers. We see it as a brand. So and I think other companies see it. There's something we will be debuting something at RoboCon. So there is the opportunity to put BotCon on more than just Transformers. How that all looks, well, a lot of that's going to depend on any possible conversations with other parties at this point. So, we're still, like I said, early stages, right? But there will be exclusives, but it may not be Transformers. It may not even be robots, but it will be the stuff that I think Transformer fans dig, because Transformers fans is a very large tent. We know that. Very big tent.
And I'm sure this will evolve or change or whatever it needs to do. Out of curiosity, if Hasbro approaches you guys wanting to become your official backer, like it was in times past, would you guys be interested in entertaining that, or would you reject it outright?
Oh, of course. I mean, any conversation would be, I would never reject that outright. I mean, that would definitely be a conversation to have. I mean, obviously there'd be always say no, depending on if they come in with some crazy offer that makes zero sense. But no, in any reasonable offer, yeah, of course, that would be something that you'd be interested in. I mean, again, BotCon and Transformers, they're synonymous in a lot of ways. Again, a 25-year history. BotCon exclusives. I mean, and there's still people. It seems like every day there's people that are still finding out about it for the first time, which is just crazy to me. But again, you can't just assume that everybody's, knows every corner of every fandom. But in Japan and parts of Asia, it's still just huge. Shattered Glass is just huge. Some of these 90s exclusives have absolutely skyrocketed in value.
I noticed, and that makes me mad because I want them.
It's funny. And on a very quick side note, I had always had two of each of some of the older ones, the 90s, and I finally thought, you know what, I don't need to keep these in the package. So I actually got rid of a lot of those at the last BotCon, and I'm sitting there thinking, why did I say? Who would have thought? Oh, it's been 20 years. It's not like Antagony is going to go up by another $1,000. Well, apparently, it went up by another $1,000.
Yep.
So
Fractal and Pack Rat are going for like $2,000 now.
That was, and let's say I sold them for nowhere near that.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that was in 5 years. So obviously there is this, this nostalgia for that brand. And I know that there's some toys from even the Fun Peb era, they've been replaced by the Hasbro versions, but there's a lot in there that people just still are excited about and dig. And I mean, obviously the 2006 set and the 2008 set. I mean, so that's what keeps me excited about it, is that there's still so much interest in some of the things that I did. We worked on with the from the Fun Pub era. So yeah, the two brands go hand in hand in a lot of ways, and if that relationship is ever restored, I think that would be a an awesome thing.
All right, now we got Grim2, who's an old timer like me and you in the chat, old school Transformer fan. He says, quoting you, might not be robots. Surely it would have to live up to the convention's name, though. So, of course, that's up to you guys, but I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment. BotCon, it's pretty obviously robot related, so hopefully that'll maintain the same in the future.
And I think will it. That's where I go back to the San Diego comment, because again, there might not be there could be something for everyone there. Don't and I, and I hope you don't feel like you have to get everything, but if you do, that's that's always a good thing from a company standpoint. But there may be something there BotCon related that you're not interested in. That's fine, but maybe there's this other group that's into this type of thing, but also into this type of thing, and they like both. I mean, there was obviously, not to the Gridman cartoon that people can kind of reference, which obviously did all kinds of crazy homages to Shattered Glass. I guess just maybe think along those lines. Sometimes things bleed over to something else that gets you excited about seeing. Whatever. I never thought I'd be interested in a Japanese anime, but hey, that was pretty wild seeing stuff that you worked on. There. I mean, it just was crazy.
Mm-hmm. We have fellow YouTuber Rodimus Primal in the chat. I don't know if you watch his channel. You should if you don't. He says, actually, my follow-up question, have locations been talked about yet for this new BotCon?
Yes. The problem, of course, we all are very, very familiar with at this time, or at this point, is the COVID-19. So that obviously has put a huge... That's why we had to push back RoboCon. As far as team that's working on sites for next year, there is a place in mind. But as far as visiting and doing the site visits and all that stuff, things have been a little crazy. But the plan still is, don't quote me on this because I'm saying the plan is to have an announcement at RoboCon of when the show will be and where it will be by the BC Productions team. That's the plan.
Oh, again, man, I was hoping I'd get an exclusive here. You tell me where it's going to be.
But with things constantly changing, with 2020 being 2020, Godzilla could be coming out of the ocean next week, and that could mess up everything. So, until I never thought I'd be living in a life like this where everything's week to week, but right now it is week to week. So the plan is to do that as long as no other major world events can prevent that. We should have that for end of July.
Okay, and we have something happen at BotCon, and of course we'll have to segue soon into the other more serious aspect of this conversation. Sure. But that was mentioned when BotCon was reannounced, and that's that the Hart brothers are involved. Is that accurate?
So John retired a long time ago. Carl and John Hartman founded BotCon in '94. John retired a long time ago. Carl is involved. He is one of the investors in the BC Productions. What his role will be at the shows, behind the shows, he works a lot. He is is very, very committed to what his job is, working with teens, high schoolers, music at high school. Of course, his world is changing a lot right now because of how. So there's again, everyone's life is in a really weird spot right now, and this affects him more than a lot of people because he doesn't know how his life's going to look over the next 2 years. But so what his involvement will be at the show, or the show, after the show, that's still all being figured out. But he is still very much a part of the show and a heart of the brand. So
yeah, all my cards on the table about that. When I was a teenager, getting really into Transformers, finding out about BotCon. This had to be late '90s. I always wanted to go to one of the Hartman BotCon conventions. Of course, I never wound up doing so. Life got away. I dropped out of Transformer collecting for quite some time, and then I picked it back up back in 2006, and I didn't attend my first BotCon until I think 2012.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, and I attended everyone after it, and of course after 4 years it's not there anymore. So I'm looking forward to that. I wonder what it's going to be like, especially with all the different changes. When it comes to BotCon itself, one of the main draws that none of us can deny isn't even really the ancillary material. Of course, the exclusive figures, the custom class, stuff like that, those are all really integral and things that people really valued. But one of the main reasons that really brought people there isn't just the guests, which we'll go over. That's going to be my follow up question, but the dealer's room. That's a major pull for a lot of people, myself specifically. And while I've been to other conventions that have been robot based or even TFCon, they don't quite get the same type of vendor pull. You might have a small booth here or there from like a Japanese vendor, but BotCons was so much more massive and had a lot more official stuff, which is what I primarily focus on. While third party is fine in and of itself, my focus is always on the official stuff. When it comes to getting dealers in, have you guys gotten a lot of interest on that end?
As far as getting dealers in, I wouldn't say we've gotten any interest yet, just because there's not really anything to official yet to pull. I can say just from the vendors that I have retained through RoboCon, and the relationships that I have maintained through the years, I am fairly confident that once the show is announced and the location is announced, the vendors will be very excited to, of all types of vendors, Transformers and robot related, will be excited to see the show come back. Again, having vendors like Transformers Land, Alpha Prime Toys, and I Am Ratchet, and so on and so forth, that have been all about coming to RoboCon, I can't, I'm sure, I'm confident that the interest will definitely be. I mean, it'll be 5 years, which again, unbelievable to me how quickly time goes anymore. But it'll be 5 years since the last BotCon when 2021 debuted. So obviously, it's going to be, quite the event.
Now,
Just from the nostalgia standpoint, I'm not saying it's not gonna. And I can tell you this much: it's whatever it's going to be. It's not going to look like the '90s BotCons, and it's not going to look like the Fun Pub BotCons. It's going to be its own thing. My hope, my goal is for it to take the best aspects of all those shows and bring something totally new and exciting. The one thing, I would like to, give myself credit for it. I usually try not to ever pat myself on the back, but what one thing I try to, unless some friends might say I do, but publicly, it was never about what I did or what I didn't do. But one thing drive me about the show was never repeating ourselves, always doing something new. When we did the Headmaster, Brian was like, "Oh, I want me to do a Headmaster." We just did a Headmaster. We need to do a Pretender. We need to keep pushing the envelope. If we do this thing, we got to keep pushing the envelope. You can't just settle into what's comfortable and normal. You want to give them something. You want to make them feel comfortable in the regard that they know they can come back to the show and it's going to feel like BotCon, but you got to give them something new every year. You got to keep, like I said, pushing the envelope. So that was something I was always very, that was one thing we did when John, Carl, and I did BotCon 2004, when we decided to go ahead and do one last BotCon after the 3H split. BotCon went on and OTFC became its own thing. If you don't know about this, there's plenty of places to go and to learn about that whole thing. And that's all been resolved since then. Actually, there was a nice reunion at RoboCon in 2018 between John, Carl, and Glenn. But anyway, one of the things I want to do is we always did the dinners, and I thought, well, that's kind of cliche at this point, so we did a BotCon breakfast. So like I said, it was always about, we had never had Frank Welker, and no one had ever had Frank Welker. And I remember in 2015, I was like, we got to get Frank. That was at this point, we've got to do it. And of course, at that point, it's like, Judd Nelson has never been to a show. We've got to get Judd Nelson. So it's like I said, it's always about doing something new, pushing the envelope, but making sure it always still feels like a BotCon. So yes, it will feel like an old BotCon, but yes, it will give you something totally different. And
All right, that's actually a really good segue here. Let's see here. We were talking earlier about guests when it came to BotCon and whatnot, right? So in 2021 is when the next BotCon is scheduled, and let me see here. That would be the 25th anniversary of Beast Wars. Are there any ideas or possibility about getting Beast Wars staff to come back on for BotCon?
oh yeah, David Kay's actually was actually the longest, not longest running. That's the right way to say it. He was the most tenured, right? Or not, that's not even the right way to say it. He had been to the most shows. Let's say it that way. Of any BotCon guest. His first show was in '97. In '97 and 2016, I think he was at 9 shows, maybe 10, but at least I think it was 9. Um, yeah, that would be great. They're still, and not to throw shade at the G1 cast, but the fact of the matter is we are, at this point going to be 40 years from G1 soon. So you have to kind of look at the fact that, unfortunately that list is not what it used to be in a lot of ways. So, what is that kind of next, where is that focus going to be, where the anniversary is going to be, who would make the most sense. And yeah, Beast Wars actors would be great, but of course there still are a lot of great G1 actors that would be wonderful to have. It's just sad. I'm friends with Abby Cluster on Facebook, and she posted about, I shouldn't be saying anything about, well, I think I'm not a big deal. I don't think she posted about her dad today, Chris Latta. I guess it's been 26 years since he died, and I just think, boy, what if he would have, he died I think a month before the first BotCon. Just thinking how amazing it would have been if he could have been to a show and see. I mean, because really, your top 3 at the end of the day were Frank, Peter, and Chris. Those are your 3 premier Transformer actors, and to never have actually met him is, what a shame that he never actually got to see how loved his characters were in these fandoms. So, or at least to the extent that they are. I'm sure he knew, but to see the extent to which. So that's a little an aside, but
I remember a couple of years ago I had spoken to Alan Oppenheimer, the voice actor for Skeletor, and I had asked him, what's the most surprising thing about all this? And his response was simple: I never thought 30 plus years after I voiced this character, people would still care about it. So your assessment isn't incorrect. I think that's pretty much the industry standard. These people, they generally go into these jobs and they do their job and they go home, and they probably don't think too much past that outside of doing their job well. So no, it would be interesting to still have him here. And that's one of my issues, being an older gentleman. And of course, my focus, while I do love Transformers, my focus is primarily Thundercats. And there's people I'll never be able to talk to because they've long since passed. So that's why guests are important to me.
Yeah, and it's again, I mean, we had just by chance, I ran into someone who worked on or someone who had worked on interviewing voice actors from Super Friends, and he had I don't even know how we came across each other, but he had mentioned how he had recently found Buster Jones.
Goodness.
He used to voice Blaster, and then he put us in contact, and I remember getting him out. Now he was already in, not the greatest shape at the time, and of course he passed a couple years later. But just getting to meet him and for him to come see fans, I mean, he came in like a suit. I mean, he had his suit and everything. I mean, it's so, that was amazing having him at the show. But again, I mean, some of these guys that we've had at the shows have either passed or have aren't even able to make it anymore. So it's just, it's sad, but at the same time, it's just kind of how life is. I mean, it's just the way it is. But you have to cherish those moments. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, while we have the Beast Wars actors, still a lot of them in their, kind of 40s, 50s, 60s, kind of that prime point, we really need to make sure that we recognize them and show that appreciation for the work that they did, which by many accounts is, and no shade to G1 people, because I am a G1 person as well, but the best Transformers cartoon ever produced which was probably Beast Wars. As far as a story, as far as a story and a full 3-year story, by far, probably, if not the best, one of the top three best Transformers franchises from a fiction standpoint. So,
well, you had some really skilled writers on it. Bob Forward, Larry DiTillo, people who worked oddly enough on He-Man beforehand.
Larry's gone now too, which is unreal. So I mean, yeah. So we need to absolutely make sure that they see that appreciation for their work.
Have you considered reaching out to Bob Skier yet?
No, but we could absolutely.
Yeah, I know he was interested in going to BotCon some time ago, but he was kind of scared to show up because Beast Machines wasn't exactly in the best light 10, 15 years ago.
You remember the whole thing? I guess the whole Marty Eisenberg getting death threats or something back in the.
Yeah.
He was scared of it too, and then look what he goes on to do, creating animated with Derek Wyatt, and he wrote 2 or 3 comics for us. He actually wrote. He didn't write. And sometimes my memory fails me, which is kind of a little scary. He actually wrote the story concept for Timelines issue 10, which was the sometimes I don't think people look at that. He had his issue 10 was the story that took place 1,000 years after he won. It was the Pirates versus Knight, the 2014 box set.
Mm-hmm.
He only felt it right since, even though it wasn't in the exact same continuity, Beast Machines and Beast Wars happened in the Wings universe. It was that show was in our universe. We only felt it right if we're going to tell a story that takes place after Beast Machines, even though it was 800 years later, that he should write it. Well, he wasn't available to write. He gave us the whole story outline, and then Jesse Wittenrich wrote the story. So that's his. I mean, wrote it. The story was his. So he has a leg. Not that just because of us, but I mean, between that and animated and everything else. The IGO Renegades, I mean, he's got a legacy with Transformers that goes way back. So, yeah. So, it's not even just Beast Machines. It's that whole Beast era, right? I'm sorry, it's not just Beast Wars. It's that whole Beast era. People that work on both those shows.
So, my final follow-up question for the convention itself is simply this. When it comes to panels at the convention, is that something that you guys set up internally, or is that something that people submit panel ideas and you allow them to host the panel within your convention, like say a comic convention or an anime convention would?
So one of the things I want to bring to the table for the show going forward, and that's where I say it's not gonna be a 90s show and it's not gonna be a 2000 show. It's gonna be a new show, but from that 90s aspect is to definitely bring back more of the fan involvement. I've been, working with Greg over at Allspark on stuff. We just did this whole March Madness thing with T-Formers and with Unicron. The fandom is a very, very large tent, and all aspects of that should be represented, and I am all for that. So to have as much fan input as we can get, and involvement as we can get.
Well, you heard him, Grim. Let's go ahead and get something together so we can have a panel where we yell and tell people they're wrong.
Yeah, unless it's the one guy that just likes to yell about how bad Beast Wars was.
No.
Not other than him, everybody else is welcome.
I know tangentially who you're talking about, but thankfully I don't have his name committed to memory. I have enough traumatic people like Raksha committed to memory. I don't need any more.
What I want to get is, now that since we're not actually technically licensed by them or anything, I want to get Tom DeSanto out, because I met him in 2004 and we stayed in touch for a couple years. Actually, we stayed in touch all the way through 2008. I want to get him to the show to give up all the dirt on everything that happened for Michael Bay and after Michael Bay.
Boy.
I want that full story, because I know part of it. I know a little behind the scenes, and I know a little bit of it, which isn't, again, a lot of people know a little bit of it here and there, but I would love to hear everything from the horse's mouth, because we were not allowed to have, I will give you an exclusive if you want an exclusive. We were not allowed to have Tom DeSanto and Don Murphy at BotCon. We were flat out told they are not allowed, shouldn't be saying this, they are not allowed to be on a panel. They are not allowed to have a microphone at these shows.
Wow.
So, I think it's time those two guys get a microphone, because that would be amazing.
Well, Grim asks, hey, could you try getting Jim Shooter?
Sure. I mean, look, there's all kinds of people. I mean, there's, and again, times, I'm just being blunt and I'm being honest, time's running out. I mean, there's people's voices that still need to be heard. People that, at some point, going to be me,
I mean,
whatever.
we just lost Denny O'Neil today.
So, I mean, I'm not trying to say you need to come to the show before you die. I'm just saying, but yeah, I mean, you need to appreciate people while they're here because we're only here for a short period of time. So, absolutely, anybody that I would love to hear from more voices, people who get the chance to meet and carry on those legacies and whatever ways they're carried on, whether it's through an autograph, a brief meeting, a story that's told again 20 years later. And I have stories that I can tell from meeting, Peter and David for the first time back in Peter Cullen and David Kay and Venus back in 1997. I mean, that's so yeah.
All right. So, real quick before we go on to the more serious aspect here, when people want certain things or certain people at a BotCon, how do they request it?
I'm sure we'll have it probably will be through this Discord. If you're not on the AllSpark Discord, you need to be on the AllSpark Discord. That right now is the direct way. Of course, there is a Facebook page too for BotCon. That's always a great way to get a hold of anybody. I mean, put it on the comments section.
I don't have I don't have an invite link to the AllSpark Discord. Doggone it.
What is it?
I don't have a link. It doesn't allow for link or server sharing. Let me go ahead and try to find one real quick.
You're fine. But yeah, but absolutely, yeah, you'll find us. We're out there. We listen. I mean, yeah. Well, anyways.
All right, let me see if that invite still works. It does not. Okay, so we'll have to figure that out in the near future, hopefully. All right, so.
I mean, worst case scenario, like I said, we'll there's gonna be a lot of BotCon talk over the next couple months. So make sure you follow BotCon on Facebook. Make sure you follow RoboCon on Facebook. Follow BotCon on Instagram, Twitter. Check us out there, and you won't be able to miss a beat. It'll all be there.
All right, Terror of Death, and of course I can answer this myself. Will we be having the more original stories set in the Transformers metaverse? Because they're not licensed by Hasbro, if they do original stories, I don't think they can make the claim that it's in the Transformers metaverse. That sort of legal gray area for fan-made material. So unfortunately, I think that's your answer. And if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, Pete.
Yeah, no, yeah, but again, I mean, it's nothing that we would necessarily produce. I mean, we do things through the custom class that are like little extensions that are in a at that point it's just it's not canon by any means. But anybody that ever wants to tell their story, I mean, we're always open to hear just to hear what they have to say. I mean, I know there's a couple stories I would still like to tell, but honestly, by the time we wrapped up in 2016, I made sure that we had pretty much wrapped up everything. And if that had been it, and I had never done another thing with Transformers again, I could have said, we had a really good run. Is there some things I still like to do? Of course. I mean, good grief, some of these toys now. Man,
right.
Man.
All right.
Years. Oh, go ahead. Anyways, yes.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into some of the things here. Of course, when I started this, I made it clear why you're here. Thank you for talking about BotCon. I appreciate that. But now we have to get into the more serious aspect of this. And that is the backlash that happened when you were announced to be a vendor there, when you were announced to be part of this involvement, and what people have said about you. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me go ahead and throw this in the chat that I have with you so you can read it over, and then I'll put it on screen and we will address it. So let me go ahead and get that ready for you. Okay. So again, this tweet currently is 3 years old. So I want to keep that in context here. This isn't something that was just put out yesterday. This is a 3-year-old tweet. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen now too. And in this tweet, it is stated, I'm not going to cuss because I just don't, by David Willis, a previous coworker. By the way, I quit drawing Recordicons for fun publication because Pete Sinclair is a racist, homophobic POS. So many Facebook posts from him about how men should be men and women should be women, and how Muslims are just naturally violent. Now, in this, I'm not asking you to address Willis directly. Instead, because we're not here to talk trash about people, we're here to address statements that have been made. So, in these accusations, number one, where do you think they came from? And number two, how do you stand on them?
Yeah, well, so let me I will try not to deviate too much, and I will try not to give too much noise in all this. First of all, and this isn't going to be about me saying anything about him or whatever. That's actually what he says right there. Actually, is just not true. As far as that's why he quit. He quit because now he can quit because he felt like I said something or did something that was in bad taste. And we can address that. I'm sure will come up. He quit specifically the day after there was a backlash online about a tweet that had been liked by the BotCon account. The BotCon account for Fun Pub back in 2015. Mm-hmm. That's when he quit. That's on. That's in my email still. I mean, I'm just saying he quit that next day. So nothing had ever. He drew Recordicons all the way through that day. He may have actually even drawn one last one after that as kind of a sign off, or maybe he didn't. I don't remember. I'd have to look. So that's when he quit. And then he tweeted this out, I guess, on the 31st of January. I know that I've never been shy about discussing topics on social media, on Facebook. Obviously, things are not always come across the best in black and white print versus whether or not you're talking to someone face to face or on the phone or video or audio chat. So again, as far as what other of these comments he's talking about, I would have to see exactly what I said to him or what I said for him to say that I am this person. I know those terms can be thrown around very loosely depending on, where you stand on an issue. Some people, their bars are lower and higher than others. I'm happy to address if there's any specific comment or post or whatever, but again, a very vague comment like that is tough. I know where I'm assuming I know where the racist comment comes from, but everything else, like I said, I would have to see an actual post.
Okay, real quick before we take your guess at what the racist comment is, you mentioned something liked by the BotCon Twitter account. What was that?
So this is what has permeated throughout the fandom, and it's funny. It's very much been a game of telephone. What actually happened, whether or not I intentionally did it or not, which I'll address that in a minute, with what happened and which actually happened, what we know factually happened, and what some people say, it has evolved into where the BotCon account was out there tweeting and retweeting racist imagery. That never happened at all. The thing that in question, and this caused a hubbub. I mean, it was a major issue for 2 days. I had to talk to the office about it. The image in question, and everyone knows this. Of course, I'm fully aware of it. Fully aware of it. Was, I guess, an image of. I would need to see the image again, but it was a guy wearing baggy pants, and it said there was like some caption, some kind of derogatory caption, like that there was, this is the name, like homo something, homo, right? We're homo sapiens. This is homo something or another, homo slackamus or something like that, with the pants down, and it kind of showed like if it was just a skeletal, it showed like a really long skeleton, because if your pants were down your knees, you'd have a really long back, right? So that was the extent of it. What happened was, and unfortunately, again, this is where I feel like, and this has nothing to do with anything else. This is just this. We're talking about just this situation right here. But I want to address this because this seems to be where a lot of it does stem from. That was something that was liked by the Twitter account. Now, I used to run the BotCon Twitter account, and there I would, of course, post updates and so on and so forth about stuff going on. What I also would use the Twitter account for, which I shouldn't have been doing because I never thought that something like this would happen, I would often search on hashtags just to like read the quote unquote news of the day. And I still do that from my, but not from my own personal account now, not from a company account. but I would click on the hashtag to read what was going on. Well, there were some issues going on. I think it was during one of the there was some incident. I forget which one. I know they had, and I remember, of course, this is all very vivid in my mind. It was the I think it was the brunch. There was like that whole brunch protest where protesters were showing up at brunches and protesting brunches. And I had searched that hashtag just to see what was going on, because that, of course, was major news that week. And like I said, I read news from I try to keep up on all the social topics, so issues. What I'm guessing is that image was probably someone who said something nasty back to someone, was in one of the tweets, and I fat thumbed the like, where you can hit the little heart button. I fat thumbed that. And the reason is that I know that it was an accident. If anyone had actually looked at the BotCon account that day, other than just pulling that one, in the 5-6 years that I ran the BotCon account, and that was the only and I didn't even have really a personal account then. So that was the only account I could really actually use for the most part. If you looked at the BotCon account, there were 8 tweets that had been favorited, 8 or 9, something like that. And all of them were very random things. None of them had anything to do with the other. It just so happened that, of course, one of the things that had been fat thumbed was this awful tweet. So then I wake up the next morning and I'm getting a message from David Willis. Why are you tweeting out this racist stuff, or why are you liking this racist stuff? Like, what are you talking about? And at first I thought my son must have, because he usually plays on my phone, he must have accidentally gotten on my Twitter or whatever. But then I went back and looked, because that's what I originally said. I was like, okay, oh wait, I did that. I went back and I looked and realized I saw 8 random things that had been liked over the course of like 2 years. And I thought, okay, I must have fat thumbed it. My dumb butt thought, okay, all I need to do is just tell people, hey, I accidentally did it. And like, people would believe me, because that's what happened. Well, really, it's not just so easy as just telling people what happened, because, we know the hubbub that happened for it. And unfortunately, that now has like evolved into this whole story of where I still sometimes see people saying, yeah, they, BotCon Twitter out there, posting racist stuff. So again, that's where the game of telephone comes in. But that is the story. And I don't know, I will absolutely apologize for using the company account for anything other than company stuff. But as far as liking that or approving of that or whatever, it just didn't happen. I usually rarely ever like anything at all, even on my Facebook page. So it's just not my thing to quote unquote like statuses. So.
All right. Now,
that's the long explanation. So that's hopefully the most I have to talk about any of these subjects, but go on.
All right. So I've had enough interaction with you on Facebook to know that you've had some extremely aggressive conversations, for lack of a better word, and that you often assert yourself in a way that seems to be very pushy or hyper aggressive, or the word a lot of people use is a very bullying manner. And I've seen that at play. You and I have argued plenty of times. You probably don't recall, but we've argued plenty of times on Cheetahmus's statuses. And for quite some time, there were times where you would say things that were completely out of pocket, or things that were somewhat tone deaf. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you some questions here.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, go ahead. The tone deaf is, yeah, please, absolutely.
Okay, you issued an apology on the AllSpark. What exactly were you apologizing for?
Well, and I would like to even think that my apology, I probably should have said something else in there. But, a lot of it was, the apology was, that I was apologizing for my tone and kind of the aggressive nature. I think that is a habit of a lot of us get into online. We don't always know we do not always communicate the way we should in black and white. Over the last, few years, I've seen this even more and more and more. And I try to not fall in that trap. I still do sometimes, absolutely. I continue to try to kind of stay away from those type of arguments. I think, though, one thing I didn't really say there that I should say now is one thing I have noticed, especially over the last couple of years, and maybe even has been I don't know how to say it, has been kind of amplified with the events of this year. Is I think there was definitely in my earlier life some tone deafness. You kind of are shaped by the your environment and your own personal interactions and your own personal life experiences. And I think sometimes, I mean, just to be blunt, what Rob and I were talking about, I think back then a lot of it revolved around what was happening in Ferguson at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, was speaking more from he lived in Baltimore at the time, I believe, and I lived in the suburbs of Cincinnati. And we did have some issues in the early 2000s, but a lot of that had actually, from at least in the suburbs point of view, had kind of died down a lot. There was a lot more. It just seems like things were a lot more calmer in Cincinnati. So, I was definitely speaking to the issue more from my worldview at that point, right? This is what I've been seeing, and again, like you, I grew up in an era of all we had was the nightly news, and you saw the major national issues, but you really didn't know what was going on in other cities. You just assumed what was going on in other cities was going on in your city. The things were pretty much the same across the board. At least that's, I think, except for like the big cities, right? You had LA, you had New York, but everything else was kind of the same. And I guess in my view, I didn't really see other cities as all that different growing up. And, a lot of those worldviews, unfortunately, from your teen years and your early 20s kind of continue to carry over. And, as I have continued to, the goal in life is to continue to learn and to continue to read and continue to, become more educated on the issues. As I have seen things that have happened over the last few years, as I have continued to listen to other people and get their perspectives, my worldview has continued to evolve. Now, I'm not going to say I've done some 180 where I was, this person here, and now I'm like, it's been a continual thing over my whole life, right? Again, what I thought was the world was much a little bit more, peaches and cream a little bit, not so much that there was any whatever, but that, for the most part, it just wasn't that bad. Things were kind of fine. And as we're finding out now, for us, right? Not for people like me, a lot of us are finding out over the last, decade or so with social media, with 24-hour cable news, that things are not fine. They're far from fine. And it needs to be addressed not just on a city, a citywide scale, but on a nationwide scale. And that's just kind of where that's what you said. That's kind of I just kind of didn't have that. I had that tone deafness. Now, so go ahead.
All right. So some of the things I'm talking about are you and Rob, and again, I don't like going into politics on this channel because it's a channel for nerd stuff, but in this case, we kind of have to. So bear with me here. You and Rob.
Nerds argue about this stuff too. So
yeah, I know. But Rob and you often argued about things like the existence of white privilege and Black Lives Matter. And just so you're aware, I did a little cursory look. And before we even agreed to fully do this, it looks like a lot of your stances have shifted. Not a complete change in some cases, but shifted to where I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat as soon as I find it again. Here we go. Doggone it, where'd I put it? Sorry, you'll have to give me a moment here. There it is. All right, and I'm going to put this on screen shortly.
Okay, you're still waiting. Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
It's on your chat now. I haven't put it on.
I see your other one. I'm sorry, I have your other one up.
It's all
right. Yeah. You know what? And the funny thing is, and I don't like sharing memes. There's a reason why, because memes are, whether you're on the left, the right, the center, they're dangerous. They're giving just a snapshot and they're not telling the whole story. So I see them from my friends on the left. I see them from my friends on the right. I'm believe it or not, I'm actually kind of hard to lock down at where I stand on a lot of stuff.
I noticed, and you used to be from what I could tell, just on what you would argue and how, you used to be generally pretty entrenched in the right. And now you seem to be more, for lack of a better word, because I don't know very many political terminologies, because my political, what's the word? I politically identify as angry. So you seem far more centered in the sense that you can see a lot of arguments from both sides and you can debate them therein. And this isn't something I would have ever expected to see on your page 5 years ago.
Well, and here's the thing, and you know what? And I bet you I wouldn't be surprised. And I look, I don't know if I ever said all lives matter. I don't. I understood the angst with the phrase back then. I also wasn't necessarily a big fan of the term Black Lives Matter because again, I didn't fully understand. I just didn't. I didn't like. I guess I was like, why are we all fighting? I guess there was this part of me was like, why are we? Because we can go into that other aspect here in a second of where actually my worldview has been changing for a long time on this. And if you want to know where my political leanings are, because again, I don't hide any of this stuff.
No.
Clearly. But this came from the fact that and I shared this for one simple reason, because this actually summed it up better than anything else. Okay, because I think here was my issue with Black Lives Matter, like right now, as I feel like they should have just put 2 on the end of there, because that really would have just shut, I felt like, a lot of people up to say that all lives matter. Because what they kind of take it as the argument is you're basically saying, well, you're just saying Black Lives Matter, and well, no, all lives should matter. Well, of course, all lives should matter. We know that. No one's saying all lives should not matter. And this, again, I don't want to get into arguments we all make back and forth. What they're saying is that Black Lives Matter too. And I get the whole idea is that it just sums it up, because they're saying there is pressing issues going on right now with us. You know, there is obviously, you know, this isn't just some anomaly. This isn't just some outlying issue. This isn't just happening in some city. I mean, we're seeing protests all over the world, in England and so on and forth. Obviously, this is a much larger issue. And yes, a lot of us were unaware of it in a lot of ways because it just was hidden in a way for so long. And now that it has really come out into the light, of course, I'm not talking about in the 60s, and of course we knew the issues then, but I'm talking about in the 80s and 90s, there just was kind of definitely a tone deafness there as a society. And now that we know that it is there and it's being said, this really just kind of sums it up, is that, hey, look, you know, what we're telling you is that we need your help right now, that there are issues that we as a community in each of these cities are facing, and that is a pressing concern. And we're not saying that your issues don't matter, but as we're trying to sit here and tell you about our issues, can we just focus on that right now? And that's fine. There is nothing wrong with saying that. So that's why I like this meme, because that really just summed it up completely.
That's
and that really, and that really does express how I feel. Now we can get into other issues if you wanted to. I mean, if you want to know where I was politically, I definitely hold much more of a libertarian. But I don't like to be locked. I don't like to be labeled as anything. I mean, I've been very liberal on the environment and the wealth gap for a very long time. You want to,
well,
as far as
it seems like most people, when they talk about how they don't want you involved because of things you said, what they're focused on is the accusations of you being racist, which Rob came out publicly said he doesn't believe you are. I don't think you are either. Based even on my previous interaction with you, I think you were more tone deaf. I think you were in a bubble, and for a while you were very stubborn about it, but based on what I'm seeing here, it doesn't seem to be. Now, could you be playing the long game? Maybe, but that's something that's going to have to be on you later on. But you used to, and you may not remember this because we argued back in 2014, anytime Rob would talk about a shooting where an officer would kill a black man, you would somewhat play devil's advocate, and sometimes to an absurd degree. And you seem to have not just leaned off that, but to where you're completely hands off and you understand what they're dealing with now. And that's a good thing, but it's also not the only thing we have to talk about here, because we also have other people, specifically in the trans community, that don't seem to be very fond of you. And I want to know from your assessment, before we go into your political leanings, your full assessment as to why do you think they have a negative view of you?
Well, to address the one issue, just real quick, you said
Sure.
For Rob and I, yeah, we would argue, and I would take, you know, I guess the way I would look at it is if you had an incident where there was something happened in a moment, happened in a second's time, and I guess I just would relate it to my own life, not obviously in those situations, but how quickly something can happen, how fast it happens in a flash. I would take the devil advocate side of, you know what, I have to allow for that this officer is saying that this was not racially motivated, this was whatever. The issue is, going back to that, is something as again the kind of the I want to say evolving, but is reading more about it. When there's this many incidents, though, whether or not there's this many incidents with whites or blacks, when there's this many incidents in specific areas, and it's not, see, people that sometimes will go to those numbers. Well, whites are killed, and this is why it drives me nuts. Why I hate memes. They'll put up these graphics. They'll say, well, X percent of whites are killed by cops, and it's still more. And I was like, but what I've tried to explain now, and some of the things that, like I said, that kind of hit you over time is, but it's not just the deaths. It's the everyday life. It's stuff that I know that I've heard people go through. So you can't just look at these raw numbers and say, oh, well, eight people died here, 6 people died here, so it's even. No, but there's all these other incidents of harassment and people being bullied and being stopped. And what is it?
And over policed, and
that's the danger of just looking at this at raw data and not extrapolating it all and realizing, okay, it's not just about the numbers, it's the whole picture. And that's something I've tried to, in all aspects of my life, continue to try to look at more of just the entire picture. Go ahead. I can go to the next part.
There's an old saying, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, but 3 times is a pattern. And I think that's more of how we had to address some of these incidents, specifically within how people in the black community or other communities of other ethnicities are treated by the police. And it seems that you're starting to understand that, if you don't already have a pretty decent understanding of that, and that is a good thing.
But then on the flip side, I mean, I'm not going to throw any single group under, whether it's, regardless of who it is. Every incident is still a specific incident. But again, it's like you said, there are a pattern. So of course, there's still going to be incidents that are not that. We need to be able to, if we can address the larger issue, then when the incidents that aren't that happen, we can all accept that it wasn't that, because the larger issue has been addressed. And you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm trying. That's what we need to get to as a society. We need to address these larger issues and actually address them in a real way. But that's, again.
Now, I had to go back again to what I asked you about the trans community. Why do you think that they have issue with you, from your personal opinion?
And that's funny, because my mom and I have actually had this conversation, and I feel like that right now is a very polarized issue. I feel like just from the way I've followed it lately, there is not much gray in any. And I don't always think that that's a good thing. I feel like there should be some type of conversation, especially since this is not a new thing, but some of the issues surrounding it's new. My mother and I have had conversations about this due to people that we each have in our lives. We both fully support, and I'm not trying to play the mother card, but again, it's odd. That's what I'm trying to have a hard time even understanding where this one came from. We both very much are supportive of anybody who feels that that they need to transition, that this is who they are. I'm not here to tell anybody who they are not. So where that comes from, I'm not sure. I know there is some talk about what's going on in athletics and stuff like that. I know I feel like there's still some uncertainty there. I'm not going to I don't really want to argue either way, because I'm not, that's one of the things where I just feel like that's a conversation between that's not even really, I feel like I'm not in that conversation. That's a conversation that is, I feel like, needs to be had between two other groups of
So,
people.
so the TLDR of that is you think that's a issue that's not really in your lane, and you want to stay in your lane.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion pretty much has been, let's just kind of see what everyone has to say and kind of see what, let's figure out. I mean, the athletics, let's have women's sports and those groups. We want to make sure everybody's represented. Absolutely, everybody should be allowed to compete. How that all looks, I don't know. Again, I'm not an athlete. I never have competed. Well, I mean, I played sports as a teen, but I'm not currently an athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I played sports as a teenager. I played them recreationally, but I'm not someone who has dedicated my whole life to training, whether I'm a female or a female who's transitioned. So that's their conversation. I mean, I'm not going to, until that is all kind of figured out. I don't know. This, when we're talking about issues like this, I guess I feel like this is an issue that we all should definitely be having a voice in. Black Lives Matter, because this issue goes back how many hundreds of years. So that's just, again, that's a stay in the lane. But as far as supporting, again, I feel like if I'm not, that's where I say the black and white kind of come in. Like, if you're not all for one or all for the other, it's somehow, no, I'm just saying I fully support you, and you all need to have that conversation to figure out what's best for all of you. But, I mean, I guess at some point, white guys don't have to have an opinion on everything. So I guess oftentimes our kind of one of the knocks against us is we do feel like we need to, but we don't. So that's kind of where I'm at. But as far if I have said something, if there was something that was said, or I would hope that doesn't come from the fact of people just kind of stereotyping, assuming that because someone has said that I am a racist in the score, that you must automatically be this, and that. Well, that's crazy, because that's not.
I will be transparent, as I am on all things. When I'd asked people for evidence of these things, it was hard to find any. Now, I don't like using argumentum ad populum because it's a logical fallacy, but based on who our mutual friends are, like Gary Chalk or Matt Frank, I don't think if you were these things, so easily to see, I don't think they'd probably want anything to do with you, because I've seen them go off on people like that. Not that that's a get out of jail free card, not that it means that you are not one. I'm just telling you based on the information I have, and in some cases a lack of information. I'd have to see more evidence to label you as things like that. Again, even back in 2014, I never thought you were a racist. I thought at the absolute worst, you were completely uninformed. Now, there are people who... go ahead.
No, I just have been completely uninformed in many points in my life about lots of things. But I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm joking. Go on.
There are people who have flat out said, if you're involved with BotCon in any way, they will not go due to these things. What response would you give to those people?
They have every right to feel that way. There was somebody, and I'm not going to say who it is, but so there's a follow up to that. Have every right to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
There was someone who contacted BC Productions and said, if Pete's involved, I have zero interest in coming. Contacted multiple times. Finally said, man, just reach out to me. I mean, let's talk. What are your concerns? What are your concerns? And we talked, and at the end of the day, it was like, man, we both were like, that's okay, cool, we're cool. And I fully expect him to see a BotCon. Now, I'm not sitting there saying that you have to contact me for me to change your mind. I'm just saying, if you have concerns, if you have whatever about me, reach out to me. Don't sit here and, at least get me. By all means, if you reach out to me and I talk to you, and whatever I say does not change your mind, or you still think whatever, that's fine. But at least take the time to reach out to me and find out, what are your concerns? I'm happy to answer. My gosh, I've been talking to people in this community for the last 25 years. And it's like you brought up Matt, and again, I'm not trying to pull, I have this friend, so I can't be this way. But I find anybody who's ever interacted at a show with me that I've ever treated anybody any differently at any BotCon show or whatever.
No, and Rob even said that on your thread. He's like, the way you acted online is completely different than how you act in person. If the way you acted online was how you acted in person, nobody would have these problems.
No, and that again, like I said, it's. I also I enjoy debate. Um, I probably shouldn't do it because I'm not a professional at it, right? You should only probably do stuff like that you're a professional at. I've gotten better, I think, but it's still, again, it's not something I think a lot of us, I think, do it, and we shouldn't be doing it. I think we can, I mean, we all have those X number of friends that never post anything on Facebook. Doesn't mean they're not um, diligent, and doesn't mean that they're not very committed to causes. It doesn't mean they don't work for them. They're just probably smart enough to stay off social media. So they're probably smarter than actually the rest of us that way. But on the same token, you need people on social media because that's the only way it changes. So again, it's a double-edged sword because that's in a lot of ways that's what brought a lot of this stuff to the surface. But what I'm saying is that those of us that are on social media, we need to be aware of our words and how we use our words because again, I have found out it can cause issues when you don't choose your words right. It doesn't mean you can't communicate what you need to say, but you need to make sure that you show the empathy, that you show a willingness to listen and to learn and to relate the best you can. That's something all can do better at. It's something I clearly should have been doing better at over the last 10 years of social media. But again, all you can do is learn. We all can. That's all you can do. I continue to learn. I'm completely open to learning. I am not set in any of my positions as far as to so much to where I'm not willing to listen to the other side to a degree. I mean, within context, right? If someone says we need to, do away with a certain people. Well, of course, no, we don't listen to that.
No.
But as far as the context of learning and having rational discussion from from people that want to make a situation better, you should always be willing to listen to anybody who wants to make a situation better. No.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and there were some people talking about how you acted unprofessionally. I, again, unfortunately, I don't have much evidence to that. The only thing I have is a anecdote, less about you and more about somebody else. But before I go into that somebody else, I have to ask, how is Mr. Savage doing?
He's fine.
Okay. The reason I ask about Mr. Savage specifically is, if I recall correctly, at the dinner at 2016's BotCon, I don't think he was aware of it, but he was at my table. He was by my table talking to a friend, and informing that friend that he had cancer.
Oh yeah, boy, that was a double whammy.
Yeah.
Here the double whammy was he found out the same day, or was it the same week? The same week Hasbro decided to pull the license for Joe and Transformers. Found out he had cancer. I'm like, what up? We're taking away your and look, I mean, well, that's not financially it was more of a hit to the rest of us, to be honest. But he's pretty much retired at this point. Now, of course, Hasbro came back to him and they continued the Joe license for another 2 years. They wanted him to do another year, and at that point, he said, "No, I've done everything I want to do." He wrapped up everything he wanted to do with the Joe brand. So they did go back to Fun Pub. Now, I was already gone at that point because I had been, downsized at that point because we had lost half of our revenue. Mm-hmm. Joe Club went on for 2 years, and then of course I started up Night Shining with Jesse the following year. At least there's been two forms for it. There was the initial, and then we not that it matters to anybody, we actually reformed to in a different manner. But no, he's great, and like I said, we bought BotCon and went through all that, and we talk every so often, and I think he's just he's got 3 boys who are all teens and now 20s, and so he's got that going on, and which I'm sure is a lot.
Yeah, I'd
going
imagine.
on.
I wanted to ask real quick how he was doing because that's when one of these stories comes from. Apparently, I heard from some friends there was people they were trying to organize people to get on the buses to go to Universal Studios at one of the BotCons. And according to him, at one point, Fred Savage kind of, or I think his name's Fred, I can't remember, Mr. Savage, kind of lost his mind, stood up on a table, and started yelling at people.
Who,
Like,
Brian? You mean Brian?
yeah, Ryan, sorry.
Brian.
Yeah.
Um, Brian. Brian's a scout leader. Brian is Brian's a leader. I mean, he's a leader, no doubt. Um, this was very direct, right? Some people don't have filters. Some people, I guess it's a Texas thing, right? I mean, he's just very direct, blunt, and when he needs something to happen and it's not happening, we're gonna make this happen right now. This needs to happen this way. Let's do it. Come on. What are we doing? Come on. So trust me, I was on the receiving end of it plenty of times through my time there. It was an interesting relationship. I'm not throwing any salt on it, but I'm just saying it was. I can see why that happened.
Yeah, but just for future reference here, and I need to make sure this is understood. If you're a scout leader, that's one thing
I know.
because you're dealing with kids, but that was extremely unprofessional.
Don't, you will not have to worry about me on any tables, or anyone else yelling at anybody. That's not my managerial style.
Okay.
But I mean, like I said, we all definitely have room for improvement, and
And
we
one thing I have to bring up because somebody's got to, and if I don't, somebody's gonna be asked why I didn't. For your thread on the Allspark about responding to people here, I don't know who this guy is, but that Primal Sabbath guy was doing you no favors in that entire thread. What is that dude's damage?
he's just he's a he's a he is a good guy. He's just he's I think he just was kind of looking out for me. It's again, it probably sometimes it's the debate that gets the better of us. So we just need to, and that was the other reason I wanted to just at some point talk with someone, because again, we get into this mindset where you dig into your position. If you start talking, it just you just want to dig in more and more and more. It's just it's that instinct, because as soon as you feel attacked at all, I'll dag on it and then just double down. And that's again a trap I have fallen into, and it's not a good thing. So we just like I said, that's I should have chimed in more, but it was I unfortunately, the reason I didn't really want to is because I know how that rabbit hole goes when you try to quote defend end quote yourself on online. It can be the gotchas come, so it's a lot easier again to just sit down and talk. And I wanted to do this a lot sooner, but again, wasn't expecting a pandemic and all the other things that have happened over the last few months. So
I will say I've been in similar situations, not to anywhere near the extent, but where people have tried to speak for me. And just for future reference, the best way to deal with that is to tell them directly, you don't speak for me, sit down and shut up. I had to do that recently where I got pulled into a call around 2 in the morning, and we were dealing with somebody our age who was being very inappropriate. And when I hopped in, somebody was saying, well, if you don't do XYZ thing, Lyle Convoy is going to do XYZ thing. And I stopped it. I said, look, I don't like this guy. He's a predator, but you don't speak for me. And that's oftentimes the best way to deal with that. So just future reference. And apparently there was some really controversial stuff on Primal Sabbath's Reddit account. I've never seen it. I don't even know how to find that type of stuff when it comes to Reddit itself. But if I find out this guy is like, for lack of a better word, in the Hitler did nothing wrong camp, would that be something you'd want me to tell you about?
Well, I would like to know if anybody's in the Hitler did nothing wrong camp. If And you know what though? At first the conversation needs to happen and be like, well, why do you feel like Hitler did nothing wrong? And if there's no changing the mind, but I dearly hope that's not the case. I don't think that's the case. I doubt it. But yeah, if you find something there, unfortunately, a lot of people use dark humor, which I'm actually not really a fan of.
Nor am I.
I mean, have I at times? Of course. I mean, sometimes we make light of a situation, sometimes just to help us cope with it. I sometimes comment on my dead grandparents, just kind of off. Well, I'll give you an example. It was kind of funny. Sometimes it's just to lighten the mood. I mean, I don't know why I'm irrelevant. We had the funeral for my last grandparent the other day, and everyone my cousin got choked up, mom got choked up, dad got choked up. I had already mourned her. I love my grandmother, 96 years old. But we went back to my mom's place afterwards, and we're all sitting there. It was fine. It's time for me to go. Finally, been there for 4 hours. Finally walked in. It's like, all right, good funeral, everybody. And they kind of just stopped for a second, but of course they know my humor. But then I followed it up with though. But then actually, again, that's kind of how I just am in life. I followed it up with saying, you know what though, it was a good funeral because this is exactly what Grandma and Grandpa would want. All of us sitting here reminiscing, not just being there quick. They're always worried about the family falling apart after they were gone, and here we all sitting here talking. So it was a good. So again, there's always sometimes underlying meaning to what I say. But my point is that back to that, I said dark humor. You have to be very, very, very good at dark humor, or it can very much be construed the wrong way. So I hope that's not the case. So
all right, now I'll go ahead and say, if we have any other follow-up questions in the chat, I'll give you guys about a minute to start asking them. And if we don't, well, we'll go ahead and close this stream out and consider it a success. People can, of course, ask follow-up questions in the comments later on. So I'll go ahead and set the timer, and we'll get ready to answer any questions if there are any.
Yeah, and like I said, you can message us you can message me. I mean, the quickest way to get me is just send a message through BotCon. That goes directly to me. So, me and Jesse. So, other than that.
Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on the show. I know that it's not always the most fun topics of conversations, but I'm glad you were able to come out here and address them. And hopefully nobody feels like I softballed you. I did the best thing I could.
No, I don't think so. Like I said, at this point too, it's not. I mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody about anything, but if there's ever, at some point you need to just say, if they have any general concerns or want to know generally, they now have this to go back to and reference, and they can listen to this. But if anybody has any follow-up questions, has a concern, if there's somebody that I said something or was too harsh, mean, if I said something that they felt was crossed the line, and I was not aware of it, by all means, message me and let's figure out what that was. But
right.
At the end of the day, the show is BotCon. Transformers is all about inclusion. That's how we ran every RoboCon. That's how I approached every BotCon. That's how I approach this fandom. Everyone is a part of it. Big Tent. Going back to Big Tent.
There is
a place for everybody, and there's a place for everybody at any show that I'm involved with, period.
All right, then. Well, we don't really have anything else going on here. This stream will, of course, stay up. I'm not going to unlist it like I do my art streams. Thank you very much for joining us, Pete, and we will see you guys next time.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the time.
No problem.